Okay, hey friends, it's Stacy. I'm back with you today to talk about some common beginner amigurumi plushie maker mistakes. Okay, so I have been a crocheter for since I was little. I learned to crochet when I was 9, 10 years old. I learned granny squares. I made little baby cardigans and sweaters and blankets and stuff when I was a child. And then when I became a mom, I did some Tunisian crochet blankets. I did some baby sweaters, booties, things like that. And I really didn't venture into the amigurumi world until last year. So probably May of 2023. But as an experienced crocheter, someone who has read patterns, I actually have done even like lace crocheting, like tatting. So I had quite a bit of experience in reading patterns and things like that. But there are some things that are specific to amigurumi that I may not have made the mistake, but I know that others have, or maybe I did make it and I want you to learn from my mistake. And so I'm just want to talk a little bit about some things that beginners should know. So I have my list of some top things that I wanted to go over, and we're going to first start with that most amigurumi is worked in a continuous round. If you do traditional crocheting, you probably don't work in a round, never have worked in a continuous round, and you are used to anything being circular. Even in like the coaster world or basket making world, sometimes you join and chain, and that first chain, 1 or 2, 3, whatever it might be, counts as your first single, half, or double, treble crochet, whatever it might be. And you're used to doing that, or you're used to getting to the end of a row and chaining and turning your work. So there's no turning in most amigurumi patterns. You work in a continuous round, which means that your first stitch that you make in the magic ring or the chain 2 or the chain or the chain 2 and magic ring, magic circle is your first stitch of the round. It's not really a row, it's called a round. And then, which is why it's so important in amigurumi to, especially if it's a pattern you're not used to and you're a beginner, is to use stitch markers. So a stitch marker, there's no right way, wrong way as far as using a stitch marker. But you can put them in the first stitch of a round or the last stitch of the round that you just worked. Whatever it is that you become accustomed to, I would just stay consistent in that. I do first stitch. I do my first stitch of a round. If I'm going to start that round, I know I'm going to finish it because I got to focus on it. So I do my very first stitch, put my stitch marker in that stitch, work all the way around. And then when I get to that stitch marker, I know that I'm done. So with that round. And then, so another thing that is unique about crocheting in the round, which you don't think about when you're working in maybe like a blanket or a pot holder, is there's an inside and an outside to your work when you're working in continuous rounds. And when you're doing a blanket, you know, you're doing a row, chaining, turning, doing another row this way. And so really there might be a side that you prefer. On some stitches, you know, there might definitely be a side that is considered the front. But when you're working in amigurumi, for sure, there is definitely a inside and an outside. There's a pretty side to your stitches, or there's a side to your stitches that is definitely prettier than other sides. So let's talk about that just a little bit. This is just a magic ring and a couple chains or a couple single crochets that I did that I started on. So this is my magic ring. Here is the tail from my magic ring, and I am holding this project facing me like this while I'm stitching. And this side that's facing me while I'm working in the magic ring, opposite of the side that has the tail, this is your front. Okay, so if you don't know that, another common saying is the noodle goes in the bowl, as eventually, if you're making something that's a sphere, a circle shaped, you're eventually, these stitches are going to start wrapping around, and this noodle can go in inside of this or in the bowl. And that's another way that you can kind of know if you've set it down or twisted it or turned it, what side is inside and what is outside. So hopefully that was helpful. Another thing is reading patterns. A lot of you have probably learned maybe by watching videos or having a grandmother or somebody show you how to do certain things. But if you're going to continue and grow and develop your skill, I think it's really important that you learn to read patterns, learn what the abbreviations mean. Now, all languages and pattern designers don't all use the same type of acronyms or the same acronyms. English terminology is pretty common among patterns as far as what abbreviations we use. Some people, though, put things in parentheses. Some will say increase around, while others will say increase times so many. Those kinds of things. Some people, a decrease abbreviation may mean to invisible decrease, but most patterns at the very beginning of them in amigurumi will tell you what the abbreviations stand for. So a bobble stitch in some people's patterns may be a BO abbreviation and may be a 4 incomplete double crochets. Someone else's pattern, it might be a BOB and it might be 5 incomplete double crochets. So it's important to learn to read patterns, understand what every one of those stitches means, and to reference the abbreviations and read through that chart at the beginning of a pattern when you are learning. And every stitch can be practiced pretty much on a flat, something flat and with acrylic yarn. Take some yarn that is not hard to see your stitches. Take a hook that maybe is too big for amigurumi, but is loose, you know, that you can really work with well, and just work stitches across something that's flat, even if you need to just work on a single crochet and a half double crochet or a bobble stitch or something like that. So practice stitches, learn to read a pattern. It will make you and it'll develop your skill faster. So that brings me into my next point, which is hook sizes and yarn. Traditional skeins of yarn will tell you on the back you know, what size or weight of yarn they are, which this is a size 6. This is a Parfait Chunky Glitz yarn, and it tells you to use an 8mm hook. We know as amigurumi makers that absolutely an 8mm hook is way too big for Parfait Chunky. And based on your tension and how tight you hold the yarn and how tight you make your stitches, it may vary. So I actually have a standard size hook that I use for each type of yarn that I've become accustomed to. So Parfait Chunky for me is a 4.5 is my standard. If I want to make something smaller intentionally, let's say I'm trying to make something with Parfait Chunky that I want to put on a key ring and I want to make it smaller, I know I can go down to a 4 or even a 3.5 size hook, and that will automatically resize my item, the pattern that I'm making, to be smaller, even though I didn't change my yarn. So don't use the hook sizes recommended on yarn for amigurumi, and find the hook size that there's a suggestion in the pattern. You know, make something with that pattern. And if you have holes, gaps, things like that, go down a half a hook size. Another beginner mistake is trying things that are too hard for your skill level. I don't want you to get discouraged and jump into amigurumi making, plushie making with a pattern that truly is above what you're capable of doing. If the pattern, a lot of times will tell you what skills it requires of you to be able to make that pattern. And there are really beginner friendly patterns, which maybe is a whole nother video, what patterns I feel like are more beginner friendly, but something that doesn't have pieces and parts, and that maybe the very first thing you make is something like a bee, where you're just literally making a magic circle, and then you're increasing, and then you're making so many rows of single crochets, and then you're doing the decreases at the end to make like a tubular shape out of it. That might be somewhere to start. And then you do more in-depth patterns that have, you know, pieces and parts and sewing and things like that too. So don't get discouraged by trying something that is too hard. You know, your first day at plushie making, you're probably not going to be able to grab somebody's extremely sewing heavy cow pattern and make it well. My very first few items that I ever make, the first month or so that I made items, I learned a lot, and I just kept trying different types of patterns, like an octopus from Crochet by Jenna, I think was one of the first things that I make, and I still have it, and it's got some holes, and I realized that my hook was too big, and so I've just learned. I wouldn't really call them failures. They were opportunities for improvement. They were ways that helped my skill grow. And just take the time and the steps. Maybe not use your best yarn when you're practicing at the very beginning, but Anyway, enough about that. Don't try too hard at patterns at the very beginning and get discouraged, because we want you to fall in love with this craft that we love so much, and you're just going to get overly exhausted and frustrated by trying something that's too hard. Okay. Another thing, safety eyes. A few things about safety eyes. First of all, let's talk about the fact that there are different types of safety eyes. If you are into plastic safety eyes for your plushies, there are different. Obviously, there are solid black ones, there's colored ones, there are glittered backed ones, and that kind of thing. But there's also different styles of closures on the back. So a standard black safety eye. Let's see if I can get my camera to focus on this. Quit looking at me and look at you guys. Okay. I would say this is standard. This is, I think, a 12 millimeter eye. And this goes, once you put this through or some people hot glue these and don't even use the backings. Some people put them through and put hot glue and the backings. But I put these through and I apply, this goes on this end and then gets pushed all the way down. Now, for the first few months of sewing amigurumi, I was, let's see if you can see that. I was doing all of these by hand. Now these basic plain white ones with these a little bit more flexible backings, these are, this is kind of a plastic that's kind of bendable. These you can do probably by hand and get them pretty tight. But I now use a safety eye tool. I bought this set of 3. There's one even smaller than this one. This is the very large one. And you would have just engaged the back of this, which with the correct size one, this is probably too big for this, but you would engage the back of this with the back of this, and you would create pressure between the two, and you would push this on there. There's other safety eye tools as well. There's jigs. There is a new one out that I saw the other day that's kind of like a plier, whatever it is that you prefer to use. And then I went to AliExpress and started ordering more fancy eyes without realizing that the backings and the types of these eyes are different. There are eyes called, they're called a sinker eye, and they are thicker. See if we can get it to focus on that. See how thick the base of these are. And the backings of these are really curved like this. Some of them are even completely look like a half of a ball. Okay, this is what I would consider a sinker eye. So it's real thick here, has this type of back here. And the point of this eye is that this eye will actually, this washer part here, will actually go on the outside rim of this eye once it's already down and complete. And will actually sink very far into, the eye will sink more into the yarn. Okay. I absolutely bought these, not realizing, 1, that they were sinker eyes, period. But 2, that they were going to be so hard when I did get them. I was super frustrated. And so I ended up buying this set on Amazon just to try to find some ways to start saving my fingers and my hands. But I now put them all the way through, and I find a hard flat surface. I use my coffee table, and I stand up and I put this on the backing, and I apply pressure downward all the way down until this eye has sunk all the way around and I can get it to sink. So that's how these eyes go on. So these eyes, not easy to put on. If you have these types of eyes and you're having a hard time getting these snapped on, that's because you probably bought them from AliExpress and not known that they were sinker eyes. Now, AliExpress does have eyes that are pretty, like these. Let's see if I can get my camera to show some of these. And they come with, this one already has the backing on it, but they come with, they're plain, but they come with little different pieces of, let me get it to, types of backings that go on the back that you then press on the back, and then it makes the eye like this. But these from AliExpress, there's a certain buyer that I buy them from, and I can leave it down in the comments if you want, but these have a more normal backing to them, and they go on and are not sinker eyes. I do use a tool to press these on, but I still use, one of my jigs to usually press it all the way, but I can do this one in my hand. Not hard. I don't have to stand up, and I'll have to use another extra amount of force like I do sinker eyes. So I would say this is Parfait Chunky, and this is probably one of the smallest eyes that I would put through a Parfait Chunky. So I've seen people use even tinier eyes, because the smaller your eye, the smaller your back is, the more likelihood, especially if you're a beginner and your tension is loose and you've gotten it, but if you can get your finger down in there, which I can't, I can get my fingernail kind of in the holes, but if you're a beginner and make sure that you use eyes that are big enough, okay? Even the bigger the better. I mean, really, in my opinion anyway, I feel like there's a cuteness factor to having eyes that are even bigger. This is Sweet Snuggles Light in size 16 millimeter eyes. So my opinion that, the bigger the better anyway. At least use a 10 millimeter eye. That is the smallest eye I use, just because I feel the most comfortable with that. But the more area that you cover and more yarn that is underneath this, that is in between the two layers, I feel like the more secure it is. So I don't glue, I don't melt, I don't boil my backings. I have heard claims about doing things like that that actually affect the plastic. The material makeup is affected by that. So like, imagine taking rubber that was cured in a certain way in a factory to withhold certain pressures and certain environment, right? And then you take it and then you bring it home and you subject it to a high temperature boiling or lighter or something, and you literally can change the composition of that plastic when you apply heat, or the amount of pressure that it can be held under. You can make it more brittle if you've applied heat, and then plastic actually hardens back once it cools. Then sometimes plastic becomes more brittle depending on the type of plastic that it is. So I just caution you using any kind of heat with the plastics just for that reason. You should be buying safety eyes that have been tested to a certain degree, that the backings shouldn't fall off. And if you're using the right size for your yarn, you should not ever be able to pull these all the way through a hole with just a human amount of normal pulling and pressure. Now, if an animal got a hold of something like this and ripped it to pieces, we know what dogs are capable of doing, puppies especially. That might always be a factor, right? So always trying to keep things like this out of reach would be handy. So my light just went off, so hold on just a second. Let's move this one. We'll just change the scenery a little bit so you can still see me. I'm almost done, so that's okay. I obviously need to charge that lamp. Okay, I think that is all the tips for today. I'm sure there are many, many, many more. And if I said something that, if you're an experienced amigurumi maker or a beginner or something, anything in this video you feel like I said that was incomplete, I don't want to give false information ever to anybody. But if I did say something that is wrong, it's not factual, that you disagree with, feel free to let's have a conversation, like civil conversation, like adults, in the comments below. And that way, if there are additional comments to things that we talked about today, that we can continue to grow and learn. And maybe in the future, there'll be a part 2 to this that has even more tips and tricks for people to learn from, on top of what I already talked about, or we can expand on some particular parts of what we talked about today. So I think that's it. And if you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and then comment down below maybe something that you learned. Even for a experienced amigurumi maker, I feel like I'm only experienced in the world of plush yarn, really. There are some very talented acrylic yarn, even smaller yarn, micro amigurumi makers that are just amazing. But I feel like I'm still learning every day. There are still things that I pick up and I learn and develop skills for that I didn't know. So leave things in the comments to help others. And if you learned something from this video, or you disagree with something in this video, feel free to have a conversation in the comments below. We are a community. I love people to learn about this craft, and I want people to continue to love it. And hopefully these mistakes will help you to avoid making them like I did, or like others have in the past. So again, hope you liked or enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, do the thing. Share it with somebody maybe who's a beginner that could also benefit from this. And leave a comment below if you found something in particular helpful or you disagree. And have a great week. Happy crocheting. Thank you.